We have Professor Marcus Fruttiger, Professor of Ophthalmology at UCL and Moorfields. Marcus, welcome.
Hi.
So Marcus, what is age-related macular degeneration?
So age-related macular degeneration, or AMD as we call it, is an eye disease that leads to blindness in people typically over 50. It affects primarily the center of vision, so it doesn't lead to complete blindness, but it affects one part of the retina which we use to recognize details, which is called the macula, hence the name age-related macular degeneration.
Marcus, the macula, tell us a little bit more about the macula and what it does and how it works.
The macula is one particular part of the retina, but before I can really explain what the macula is, I need to explain a little bit more about what the retina is. So the retina is at the back of our eye, and it has a light-sensitive layer at the back of our eye. And back there are photoreceptors that can recognize the light that's hitting the back of our retina. It's a bit like the film at the back of a camera. And those photoreceptors transform the light into an electric signal, which is then sent via the optic nerve to our brain. Now, in the retina, because it is a biological system and it always tries to be economical, the density of those photoreceptors is not equally distributed. So you can look at each photoreceptor is a bit like a pixel in an iPhone. So unlike an iPhone where you have an equal distribution of those pixels, in the retina those pixels are much higher concentrated in one particular spot, and that is the macula. Whereas in the periphery the density of those pixels of the photoreceptors is much lower. So the macula is only a few millimeters across. It's roughly about 5 millimeters or so, and you could argue it's probably the most important 5 millimeters of tissue in your entire body. There's nothing else that has a bigger impact on your entire life than those 5 millimeters of tissue in your body, because it mediates our fine vision. So we use that particular part of the retina to read or to recognize faces, or for driving, anything that is required to recognize fine detail. Because our peripheral retina, what we can see out here, we cannot recognize the small details. So you may be able to just about see how many fingers are here, in particular when you move them, but you don't have fine resolution. So our periphery, we use that to navigate, to be aware of our surroundings and to detect movement. It's quite sensitive to movement. But the center of our vision, and we constantly move our eyes around to point that bit to what we're interested in, that is really needed for the high resolution vision.
Tell us about the symptoms of AMD.
So any disease that affects the macula will have an impact on that higher resolution vision which we have in the center of our vision. And it means that you will perceive blurred vision or problems reading. You will have possibly distortions of your vision. So, but eventually, once disease really progresses, you just have a complete loss of vision. So there's just a blind spot right in the center of wherever you're looking, which is very difficult to live with.
Marcus, tell us, who is most at risk, or who's most likely to get AMD?
So regarding the risk to develop AMD, we actually understand a fair bit. And there's two categories of risks. There is, on the one hand, there is the unavoidable risks, and then there is the avoidable risks. In the unavoidable category, we have aging and genetic predispositions. So aging, there's nothing really we can do about it. We just all age, and the older you get, the higher the likelihood that you will develop at some point a age-related degenerative disease such as AMD. The other one is the genetic predispositions, and that is, if you have in your family some cases of AMD, there is a higher probability, a higher chance of getting it. But it doesn't necessarily need to be the case that you have cases in your family. It can also, individuals can just have a higher genetic risk of developing the disease. The second category is in a way the better one, because we can do something about those to avoid them. And the biggest one of avoidable risk factors for AMD is smoking. That's been clearly established. Further down is the general kind of lifestyle related risk factors, so that would include diet, exercise and alcohol consumption. And also having high blood pressure can contribute to the risk of having AMD. All of those are risk factors which we can actually do something about it. So by changing our lifestyle, and possibly also with some medication in the case of high blood pressure.
So Marcus, thanks for that. Moving on, are you able to tell us what causes age-related macular degeneration?
So here, despite of decades of research into the causes of AMD and a very good understanding of the risk factors that contribute to the increased likelihood of developing AMD, we do not yet understand the real mechanisms that cause AMD. There's still a mystery. There are, however, a number of scientific theories out there that speculate about, with some reasonable evidence supporting that, about what may be actually the causative mechanisms that lead to the degeneration of that particular area in the retina. These theories, probably one of the most important ones, is all kind of revolve around oxidative stress. Because that particular part in the retina is actually physiologically extremely active. It uses a huge amount of oxygen, and there is light continuously coming into that piece of tissue. And that causes what we call oxidative stress, because a lot of energy is being burned in the presence of light, and that can lead to so-called reactive oxygen species, which damage cells in the retina.
Marcus, thanks for that. We've heard of AREDS2. Do you mind telling us a little bit more about AREDS2 and its relevance to AMD?
So AREDS 1 and 2 are two very big studies that have been conducted to look at the impact of dietary intervention on the progression of AMD. AREDS 2 is based on around 4,000 people and has studied them over 5 years, and they were split into different arms, and they received different types of supplements. And so there's control groups, and then there was one particular arm of around over 1,000 people that have received supplements that contained lutein and zeaxanthin. Based on the conclusion from this ARED study, it appears that at least in people with where there's already an early onset of AMD, supplementing via the diet, lutein and zeaxanthin can reduce the risk of the disease becoming worse. So the progression of the disease the risk of that is reduced. So it appears that this particular supplement is beneficial in avoiding getting the disease of the disease getting worse. We don't have conclusive data about what this type of supplement does in perfectly healthy people, and nobody knows that. So regarding this, we can just hazard our best guess and look at the scientific rationale that would guide us in if we want to do something about avoiding the risk of AMD. And I would say it makes sense, considering the fact that it slows down AMD in people who already have AMD, but also considering some of the mechanisms which we think play a role in AMD. It would make sense to consider that this particular supplement is a good option to prevent AMD.
Marcus, are there any lifestyle changes that we could make that could potentially slow down or stop the onset of AMD?
Yes, absolutely. So the obvious one is don't smoke or stop smoking. That is probably the biggest one. And in addition, obviously there is make healthy lifestyle choices. So that includes exercise and a healthy diet. In addition, have your blood pressure checked regularly would also make sense. Maybe more eye specific, you can also protect your eyes against strong UV radiation by wearing sunglasses in bright sunlight. That certainly also makes sense. And in addition, regularly have your eyes checked at the opticians. These days they're quite good. They have very good equipment to check also the back of your eye, not just whether you need glasses or not. And lastly, you could also consider taking vitamin supplements that support your eye health. So a good choice there would obviously be a formulation of vitamins that's based on the AREDS 2 formulation that has been shown to have beneficial effects for eye health.